The storm raged on as Ramesh knelt beside the stranded car, his hands trembling as he tightened the last bolt. The relentless downpour soaked his shirt, but he didn't care. The woman inside the car, a stranger, was pale and shivering, her voice barely audible over the roar of the rain. "Please, I need to get to the hospital," she had said when she first approached him on the side of the desolate highway. Her words carried desperation, and her eyes were filled with silent panic. The car's engine coughed to life, and Ramesh wiped the sweat and rain from his brow, letting out a breath of relief. "It should work now," he said, stepping back. The woman, still clutching her swollen belly, nodded tearfully. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you." As she drove off into the storm, headlights fading into the darkness, Ramesh stood there for a moment, drenched and exhausted. This encounter, however, was only the beginning. The sun was setting behind the hills, casting a dim orange glow over Ramesh's barren fields. He stood on the cracked soil, his hands resting on a rusted hoe. This land had been in his family for generations, but the once fertile earth had betrayed him. Unpredictable rains and relentless droughts had destroyed his crops season after season, leaving him drowning in debt. Ramesh had always been a proud man, but the weight of unpaid loans had broken him. The bank's letters had grown more threatening with each passing month, demanding payment he didn't have. His wife, Anjali, had tried to comfort him, saying things would improve, but Ramesh knew better. If he didn't act soon, the farm would be taken, and his family would be left with nothing. That evening, he prepared to drive into town for a meeting with the council. This meeting, he hoped, would be his salvation. If he could convince them to extend his loan deadline, he might have a chance to plant a new crop and turn things around. Anjali, standing by the doorway, pleaded with him to stay. "It's storming, Ramesh. The roads will be dangerous." Ramesh shook his head, grabbing his coat. "I don't have a choice. If I don't go now, everything will be lost." The rain had already started as he climbed into his old, rattling truck. The engine sputtered to life, and he gripped the wheel tightly, his knuckles white with determination. As the storm clouds gathered overhead, so did the weight of his fears. Yet, amidst his desperation, Ramesh held on to a sliver of hope. He had to believe that this trip could change his family's fate. But fate, as it turned out, had other plans. The rain came down in unrelenting sheets, pounding against the windshield of Ramesh's truck as he navigated the winding road to town. The wipers squeaked in protest, barely keeping up with the downpour. His thoughts were consumed by the meeting ahead. Every decision he had made recently seemed to teeter on the edge of disaster, and this meeting felt like his last hope. Suddenly, through the curtain of rain, he spotted flashing hazard lights on the roadside. As he drew closer, he saw a woman standing outside the car, waving frantically. Her soaked sari clung to her shivering frame, and her face was pale with worry. Ramesh slowed the truck, his mind torn. He was already late for his meeting, and stopping now could mean missing it entirely. Yet something about her desperation tugged at his conscience. He rolled down his window, rain splashing onto his face. "What happened?" he asked. "My car. It broke down," the woman stammered, her voice trembling. She placed a hand on her swollen belly, her other arm shielding her face from the rain. "I'm pregnant, and I need to get to the hospital. Please, help me." Ramesh looked at her, then at the dark, empty road ahead. Every second spent here was a second closer to losing his farm. But could he really drive away and leave her stranded? With a heavy sigh, he parked his truck and grabbed his toolbox from the back. "Let me see what I can do," he said. The woman's face lit up with relief, but Ramesh felt the weight of the decision pressing on his chest. As thunder rumbled overhead, he realized he was risking everything to help a stranger, and he could only hope it wouldn't cost him more than he could bear. Rain hammered down relentlessly as Ramesh crouched by the woman's car, inspecting the engine with his flashlight. The storm showed no signs of easing, and his hands trembled as the cold seeped into his bones. Steam rose from the overheated engine, and he quickly realized the radiator hose had burst. It was a critical issue, but not one he couldn't patch temporarily. The woman stood behind him, clutching her belly and leaning against the car for support. "Will it take long?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the rain. "It's not a quick fix," Ramesh replied, frowning as he rummaged through his toolbox, "but I'll get you back on the road." Time ticked by as Ramesh worked tirelessly. He used a piece of duct tape and some spare tubing from his truck to patch the hose. The rainwater dripped into his eyes, making it hard to see, but he refused to stop. He knew the woman's situation was dire, and her fragile condition weighed heavily on his mind. "Why are you doing this for me?" the woman asked suddenly, her voice breaking. Ramesh paused, looking up at her. "Because you needed help," he said simply, before returning to his task. The minutes felt like hours, but finally he tightened the last bolt and stepped back. The car's engine coughed as he turned the key, then roared to life. Relief washed over him, though his body ached from the effort. "It should hold," he said, stepping aside. The woman's eyes filled with tears as she clasped his hands. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. As she drove off into the storm, Ramesh stood there, drenched and exhausted, unaware of how deeply this moment would alter his life. Ramesh sat in his truck, drenched and shivering, as the taillights of the woman's car disappeared into the storm. He felt a strange mix of relief and dread. He had done the right thing, hadn't he? But as he glanced at the clock on the dashboard, his heart sank. He was already an hour late for the meeting. Gripping the steering wheel tightly, he started the engine and drove toward the town council office. The rain poured harder, the wipers working overtime to clear his view. His thoughts raced faster than the truck, each one echoing the same fear. What if I've lost my chance? When he finally reached the town, the streets were empty, the storm having driven everyone indoors. Pulling up to the council building, Ramesh saw the dark windows and locked doors. He jumped out of the truck and ran to the entrance, pounding on the heavy wooden doors. "Please, is anyone there?" he shouted, his voice barely audible over the rain. But the building was silent. The meeting was over. Ramesh stood there for a long moment, letting the reality sink in. This was his last chance to request an extension on his loan, and now it was gone. The weight of his failure pressed down on him, and the rain felt colder than ever. He returned to his truck, defeated, and stared at the empty street. Helping the woman had cost him everything, or so it seemed. As he drove home, the headlights slicing through the storm, Ramesh couldn't help but question his choice. Had he done the right thing by stopping? His farm, his family's legacy, was now in jeopardy. Yet in his heart he knew he couldn't have driven past her cries for help. Ramesh returned home late that night, his clothes soaked and his spirit broken. Anjali was waiting by the door, her face full of concern. She didn't ask any questions, she didn't need to. The weight on his shoulders told her everything. "It's over," Ramesh whispered, collapsing into the nearest chair. "I missed the meeting. They'll take the farm." Anjali placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You did what you thought was right, Ramesh. That has to count for something." But Ramesh wasn't convinced. His family's future now seemed as bleak as the storm still raging outside. That night, sleep evaded him as he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how he would break the news to his children. The next morning, the storm had passed, and the sunlight streamed through the windows. It felt like a cruel contrast to the despair in Ramesh's heart. He sat at the kitchen table, sipping a cup of tea in silence, when a knock on the door startled him. Opening it, he was surprised to see a black SUV parked outside. A man in a crisp suit stood on the porch holding a briefcase. Behind him was the woman Ramesh had helped the night before. She looked radiant, no longer the terrified figure stranded in the rain. "Mr. Ramesh?" the man said, offering a polite smile. "I'm here on behalf of Mrs. Kapoor." Ramesh blinked in confusion, his mind struggling to connect the dots. The woman stepped forward, her eyes brimming with gratitude. "You saved me and my baby last night," she said softly. "I didn't have the chance to thank you properly, but today I want to repay your kindness." Ramesh's heart raced as the man opened the briefcase. Something told him his life was about to change. Ramesh stood frozen in the doorway, still processing the unexpected scene before him. The woman who had been stranded in the storm now stood in front of him, looking nothing like the desperate figure of the previous night. Her demeanor was calm, almost regal, and the man with her exuded an air of authority. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand," Ramesh stammered, his voice shaking. "Who are you? What is all this about?" The woman smiled warmly, as if recognizing his confusion. "My name is Meera Kapoor," she said, "and this is Mr. Desai, my family's lawyer." Ramesh felt his pulse quicken. Kapoor? The name was unfamiliar to him, but there was something in her presence that suggested wealth and influence. Meera continued, "I'm the daughter of a prominent businessman. Last night I was in a hurry to get to the hospital for a checkup. When your truck stopped to help me, I didn't realize who you were. But when I saw the condition of your land as I drove past it this morning, I couldn't help but feel the urge to do something." Ramesh felt a knot form in his stomach. He hadn't expected anything like this. "I know you've been struggling," Meera said gently, and I know what it's like to lose everything. That's why I'm offering you a chance to turn things around." Mr. Desai opened the briefcase and handed Ramesh a folder. "This is a formal agreement for a loan extension," he explained. "But it's more than that. Mrs. Kapoor wants to invest in your farm, help you modernize it, and provide the resources you need to thrive." Ramesh's mind raced. This was the lifeline he had been praying for, but it felt too good to be true. Could it really be happening? Ramesh sat at the kitchen table, the folder from Meera Kapoor lying open before him. His eyes scanned the terms, each clause seeming more impossible than the last. The loan extension was generous, no doubt, but the proposal to modernize the farm and invest heavily in machinery and technology, it was a leap into the unknown. Ramesh had always worked the land with his own hands, never relying on others. The thought of giving up control was unsettling. Anjali stood beside him, her face unreadable as she read over his shoulder. The storm that had raged in Ramesh's heart last night had quieted, but it was now replaced with an overwhelming sense of doubt. Could he really trust a stranger to help save their livelihood? "I don't know," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "It seems too good to be true. What does she want in return? What if it all falls apart?" Anjali remained silent for a moment, her fingers gently brushing the paper. "Ramesh, we've been struggling for so long. The farm, the loans, the constant worry. If there's even a chance this could work, don't we owe it to ourselves to take it?" Her voice was steady, but there was a hint of hope in her words. Hope that Ramesh hadn't felt in months. "But why would she help us?" Ramesh asked, the question lingering in the air. "We're just ordinary people." Anjali met his gaze, her eyes firm. "Maybe that's exactly why. Maybe she sees something we don't." Ramesh took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The future of his family, his farm, rested in his hands. And yet, for the first time in a long while, he felt a spark of possibility. Maybe this was the chance he had been waiting for. With a shaky hand, he signed the document. Days passed, and Ramesh found himself waking up each morning with a renewed sense of purpose. The decision to accept Meera Kapoor's offer had changed everything. The loan extension had given him the breathing room he desperately needed, but it was the investment in the farm that truly ignited hope in his heart. The machinery arrived within a week, tractors, harvesters, and equipment that Ramesh had only dreamed of using. Meera's team had already arranged for experts to guide him through the process of modernizing the land. For the first time in years, he felt like he had the tools to succeed. But it wasn't just the equipment that transformed the farm. It was the shift in Ramesh's mindset. He began to see his work not as a constant struggle, but as a partnership between his labor and the resources now at his disposal. The farm no longer felt like a weight on his shoulders, but a source of pride. Anjali noticed the change in him too. She had always believed in him, but now she saw the fire of determination return to his eyes. "You're doing it," she said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the freshly plowed fields. "You're really doing it." And it was true. The crops began to grow healthier, the yields more abundant. The farm was flourishing in a way Ramesh hadn't thought possible. One day, as he was walking through the fields, Ramesh stopped and looked around. The wind rustled through the crops, and he felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The farm, his family's future, and his own dreams were no longer in jeopardy. It wasn't just a new beginning for the farm, it was a new beginning for Ramesh and his family. The storm had passed, and the sun was shining brighter than ever. If you've ever faced a tough decision or struggled with uncertainty, Ramesh's story is a reminder that taking a chance on something bigger than yourself can lead to life-changing opportunities. Just like Ramesh, you have the power to choose hope over fear and embrace the unexpected turns that life offers. Don't let fear hold you back from making decisions that could transform your future. If you've been inspired by this story, share it with others who may need that extra push. Subscribe, comment below, and let us know how you would make a tough choice. Together, we can find the courage to create our own new beginnings.